I didn't even want to go to the hospital that night. Like at all, I'm the type of person who'll tough out a fever, ignore a cough, and pretend a sprained ankle is just vibes. But when you wake up with pain so sharp it feels like someone's twisting a knife under your ribs, you don't really get to be stubborn anymore. You just sit there in the dark, sweating, trying to breathe through it, and eventually you realize you're not being dramatic. You're being alive, and alive people go to the ER. My girlfriend at the time, Alyssa, was the one who drove me. She didn't ask questions, she didn't do the whole "are you sure" thing. She just grabbed her keys, told me to put on shoes, and basically dragged me into her car. The entire drive I kept thinking I was gonna puke. Not because I was nauseous, but because something about the pain felt wrong, like it didn't belong in a normal human body. The streets were empty, the kind of empty you only see after midnight when even the drunk people have decided to go home. The hospital was 20 minutes away, but it felt like we were driving toward a different planet. The ER entrance was lit up with harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly and gray. There were two dudes outside smoking under the "no smoking" sign, and they looked like they'd been carved out of exhaustion. Alyssa helped me inside, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the normal hospital smell, not just disinfectant, it smelled like bleach trying to cover something up. Like something bad happened here and the building was still trying to pretend it didn't. The waiting room was almost empty. A woman with a blanket over her head sat in the corner rocking slightly. A guy with his arm wrapped in a towel was staring at the wall like he'd forgotten what walls were. The TV was on, muted, playing some late-night information. The receptionist behind the glass looked like she hadn't slept since 2012. She asked for my name, my birthday, insurance, the usual. I gave it all to her while trying not to fold in half from the pain. Then she asked, "Have you been here before?" I told her no. She stared at her screen for a second, frowning before typing something else. Then she said, "Okay, we'll get you back soon." The way she said it made my skin prickle, like she already knew something I didn't. The nurse came out a few minutes later and called my name. She was young, maybe late 20s, hair pulled tight under her cap, and she had this tired kindness in her eyes. Alyssa started to stand up with me, but the nurse held up a hand and said, "Just him for now." Alyssa looked confused and said she was my ride, but the nurse stayed polite and firm. "I know, just him." I didn't want to argue, I was in too much pain. So I followed the nurse down a hallway that felt longer than it should have been. The lighting flickered slightly, not enough to be dramatic, just enough to be annoying. We passed doors with curtains half drawn. I heard coughing, I heard someone laughing softly like they were watching something funny on their phone. Then I heard a sound I didn't like, a wet, choking sob. It stopped the moment we walked by, like whoever made it realize they weren't alone anymore. The nurse led me into a small triage room and told me to sit. She asked the basic questions: pain level, where it hurt, how long it'd been going on. And she took my blood pressure, my temperature, and when she clipped the pulse ox to my finger, her face changed a little. I asked what was wrong. And she said nothing, but she kept looking at the monitor. And she said my heart rate was kind of weird. When I asked how weird, she didn't answer. She just stepped out of the room, and I heard her whispering to someone in the hallway. Her voice was low, urgent. I couldn't make out the words except one phrase that made my stomach drop. Same as last time. I sat there for a second trying to process what I'd heard. Same as last time. I'd never been here. I'd never even been to this hospital. I didn't live in this part of town. The only reason we came here was because it was the closest ER. The nurse came back in with a different nurse. This one was older, maybe in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense posture. She looked at me like she was seeing a problem she didn't want to deal with. She asked for my full name and my birthday, and I told her both. She stared at me for a long time and then said, "Okay, we're gonna get you an Imagine and just relax." I half joked and asked if I was dying, but neither of them laughed. They wheeled me out of triage and down another hallway. I passed a sign that said radiology, then another that said restricted access. The older nurse pushed right through the door without swiping a badge. That's when I started getting that feeling, the one where your brain is screaming that something's wrong, but you can't explain it logically. and you suddenly realize you're not alone. The hallway beyond the restricted door was darker. Not fully dark, but the lights were dimmed like the hospital was trying to save electricity. The air felt colder. The walls looked older too, like this part of the building hadn't been renovated in decades. We passed an elevator with an old-fashioned metal gate. The older nurse hit the button without saying anything. I asked what floor we were going to, but she ignored me. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. The gate slid open with a rattling sound that made my teeth hurt. The nurse pushed my wheelchair inside and pressed a button that didn't have a number on it. Just a blank metal circle. The doors closed and the elevator started moving downward. I watched the floor numbers light up. 1. Then nothing. No basement level, no B1, just darkness. The elevator kept going. I asked how many floors the hospital had, trying to keep my voice calm. The older nurse finally looked at me, her eyes flat, and said, "Just breathe." That's when I realized I couldn't hear the younger nurse anymore. She wasn't in the elevator. It was just me and the older nurse. The elevator stopped and the doors opened. The smell hit me like a punch rod, not subtle, not hidden under bleach, full-on, unmistakable rot. The hallway outside the elevator was narrow and lined with doors, no windows, no nurse's station, no sound except a faint hum like machinery running somewhere far away. The lights overhead were dim and yellow, like the hospital was lit by old bulbs instead of fluorescence. The older nurse pushed me out. I told her to wait and ask where we were, but she didn't answer. We stopped at a door labeled observation. She opened it, rolled me inside, and the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt the temperature drop like the air was refrigerated. The room looked like an old hospital room from a horror movie. One bed, one metal tray, no decorations, no TV, no modern equipment. The walls were stained slightly like water damage that had been painted over 100 times. There was a curtain in the corner, drawn shut. The older nurse locked the door behind us. That's when I sat up straight and asked why she locked it. She looked at me like I was being annoying and said, "So you don't leave." My mouth went dry. I asked what she meant and she repeated it like it was normal. I wasn't supposed to leave. I stood up, ignoring the pain for a second, and said I was going back upstairs because my girlfriend was waiting. The nurse stepped closer and told me to sit down. I refused. Her face twitched, not like anger, but like something was fighting to come out. She lowered her voice and said I didn't understand and that this wasn't for me, it was for them. I asked who them was, but she didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the corner and grabbed the curtain. My whole body tense, my brain was screaming at me to run, to shove past her, to kick the door, to do anything. And she yanked the curtain open. There was another bed behind it. Someone was lying on it. At first, I thought it was a corpse. The skin was gray, the lips pale, the eyes closed, the chest didn't rise. Then the eyes opened and looked right at me. I froze because I was staring at my own face. Same nose, same jaw, same scar above the eyebrow from when I was 12 and ate concrete trying to skateboard. It was me. Or something that looked like me. The thing on the bed smiled slowly like it was enjoying my reaction and whispered, "Took you long enough." I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. My brain was glitching. This wasn't possible, this was a nightmare. The older nurse leaned close to me and whispered, "Your chart." It never closed. I turned to her shaking and asked what she was talking about. She sighed like she was tired of explaining and said, "You died here. Years ago, your file never closed. So when you came back, the system recognized you. I shook my head hard and told her no, I'd never been here. The thing on the bed chuckled a wet sound and said, "You've been here, you just don't remember the first time." My knees went weak, I grabbed the edge of the metal tray to steady myself. I asked what it wanted. The thing's eyes flicked toward the door and it said it wanted to leave. The older nurse's face tightened and she told it no, it wasn't allowed. The thing laughed again and suddenly started coughing, a deep choking cough that sounded like it was pulling something up from its lungs. Then it sat up too fast, like a puppet yanked by strings. The skin on its arms looked wrong, loose in places, tight in others, like it didn't fit. It swung its legs off the bed and I saw its feet bare and covered in dust, the same kind of dust you'd see in an attic. My stomach flipped.
Between us and told it to stay back. The thing tilted its head at her and said she couldn't keep it forever. She hissed that it wasn't supposed to be here. The thing's smile widened and it pointed at me. Neither is he. That's when the lights flickered, the hum and the walls grew louder. And I heard something in the hallway outside the room, footsteps slow dragging, my blood turned to ice. The older nurse's eyes went wide, and for the first time she looked scared. She whispered, "Oh no." The thing on the bed grinned like it was Christmas morning and said, "They heard you." The footsteps stopped right outside the door, then something scratched the metal, a long, slow scrape like fingernails. The older nurse backed away from the door, hands shaking. I asked what it was, and she swallowed hard and whispered, "The ones who don't get discharged." The scratching stopped, silence, then the door handle started turning slowly, even though it was locked. The older nurse grabbed me and shoved me toward the bed and told me to get under it. I panicked, asked what she meant, but she hissed for me to do it. Now I dropped to the floor and crawled under the bed. The metal frame was cold against my back, dust filled my nose. I could see the older nurse's shoes planted firmly on the floor. Then the door opened, not with a click, but with a wet sound, like skin peeling off something. A figure stepped into the room. I couldn't see its face from under the bed, only its feet. Bare feet, blackened and dripping, and moved slowly, each step leaving a damp print on the floor. The older nurse didn't move. I heard her whisper, "Please. Not tonight." The figure didn't respond. It just walked deeper into the room, toward the curtain, toward the other bed, toward the thing that looked like me. The thing giggled softly and whispered, "You're late." The figure stopped and the room filled with the sound of breathing, not normal breathing, more like inhaling through wet cloth. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Then I heard the older nurse scream, a short, sharp scream that cut off instantly. I peeked out from under the bed. The older nurse was gone, like she'd been erased. The figure stood where she'd been and it was turning toward my bed, toward me. I froze. The thing that looked like me leaned forward, eyes gleaming, and whispered that it was okay, that it didn't hurt, that you just stop. The figure stepped closer and I felt my body go numb. Then a loud bang came from the hallway. A voice shouted, "Hey! Open up." It was Alyssa. The figure paused. The thing on the bed hissed like an animal. The banging continued and Alyssa shouted again, saying she knew I was in there. The figure's head tilted slowly like it was listening, then it moved toward the door. That's when I saw my chance. I crawled out from under the bed and sprinted toward the opposite wall where I'd noticed a small door like a closet. I yanked it open. It wasn't a closet, it was a narrow stairwell leading upward. I didn't think, I just ran. The stairs were steep, cramped, and smelled like mold. My hands scraped the walls as I climbed behind me. I heard the thing that looked like me laughing. It called out for me to run like I did last time. I didn't look back. I climbed until my legs burned, until my lungs felt like they were tearing. Finally, I burst through a door at the top and stumbled into a hallway that looked normal. Bright lights, clean floors, nurse's station. The sound of distant monitors. I nearly cried from relief. A nurse turned and stared at me and asked if I was okay. I grabbed her arm and asked where the exit was. She frowned and pointed like it was obvious. The exit was right there. I stumbled through the doors into the waiting room. Alyssa jumped up the second she saw me. She yelled, asking where the hell they took me, saying she'd been arguing with the staff for like 20 minutes. 20 minutes. My stomach dropped. It felt like hours. I grabbed her hand so hard she winced and told her we were leaving. She tried to protest, saying they didn't even tell me what was wrong, but one look at my face shut her up. We got into the car, and the moment she started driving, I looked back at the hospital. The lights on the building flickered, and for just a second I saw someone standing in the top floor window of the hospital. A pale face. My face. Smiling. Alyssa drove me home, and I didn't speak the entire way. The pain in my side was gone completely, like it had never existed. That should have made me happy. It didn't. Because I knew deep down the pain wasn't real. It was bait. Something had wanted me there. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with every light on, staring at the front door. Around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. A voicemail, no missed call, just a voicemail. I hit play. At first it was static, then breathing, then a voice dry and cracked.
My voice. It whispered, "You can't keep running. You already checked in." I deleted the voicemail, blocked the number, and turned off my phone. And still, I could hear it softly from somewhere inside my apartment. A slow, dragging sound coming from the ceiling.